Good morning. My name is Stan Bauer, and we actually have a worldwide audience. We have perhaps 70 pastors from India and hopefully people from Brazil. We got people all across the United States and maybe one in Hawaii and a few others. My name is Stan Bauer. I'm the area director of CBMC Dallas-Fort Worth. So just remember, down here in Dallas, in this place, get used to different. And every time a man follows Jesus or a woman, you have to get used to different, because he'll change the path you're on. He'll do it all the time. Now, this is the confluence. And a confluence is very simply, it's a merging of two or three rivers, and you get together and you have those rapids that come together. It gets all jumbled up and doing it. And then it flows smooth downstream 5, 10, 20 miles. And the confluence for Dallas is essentially with all the ethnic groups we have in Dallas and around the country. There's people from all over the world that come through this portal of Dallas. We have different men from backgrounds, from India and Africa, wherever you're from. And it's a mixing of people. And God died for people. So you're one of the persons that Jesus died for. And you out there in the world, in India or Brazil, wherever you are, he died for you too. And the problem we have is 98% of the world doesn't believe in him. 98% of the world. Out of about 7.6 billion people. So it's a narrow slice of the pie we're looking at. So this merging of people, groups that come together, is an interesting factor that's happened. And our friend today is going to talk a little bit about how he's doing something in educational field. So that's our confluence. And what is CBMC? CBMC stands for Connecting Businessmen to Christ. And the businessmen of America, they're the ones that supply every missionary effort throughout the world. Whether you give $10 or $1 million, you fund the work of people that are going in the hole to help people find out who Christ is. And CBMC is part of that function. And we operate on 2 points, which is essentially evangelism and discipleship. We'll talk about that. But our purpose is every man will have an intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. A personal, intimate relationship. Because that's the only way you get to know how to run this life we're doing. And the mission is every man becomes a disciple maker, right? And then we're going to multiply and disciple and multiply the world. Now, in a minute, I'm going to show you a little bit how we can do this. But that's our purpose, mission, and vision. The movement that we have here in Dallas, we start off with a man has an intimate relationship with Christ, John 17:3. Then we go to Paul, which is the Great Commission, go ye therefore in the world, make disciples all nations, which is a one-on-one relationship. Then what we want to do, like with Joshua Graziani sitting over here, that he'll start pouring his life into other men. 2 Timothy 2:2, it says, "And the things you heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, and trust a reliable man who are qualified to teach others." So the point is, discipleship is the key. And Jesus started the original model on this thing. And we failed to do it. Let's look at the next slide. So let me show you a little deal here. Let's just suppose one of you guys decides to do a church here in Dallas or in India or Brazil or New York City, wherever else he is. And every day for 1 year, through the Holy Spirit, a man or a woman becomes a Christian. You do it for 365 days in 1 year. Then at the end of 9 years, you've done the same thing. You end up with 3,200. 18th year, 6,570. And then the 27th year, 9,855. And then at the end of 33 years, you have 12,045 people. And that guy's done a good job in his church, right? Using the Holy Spirit. It's wonderful. But we have a problem here in Dallas. There's how many people? About 7.6 million. Now, you haven't made a dent in it, so to speak. So I wonder what the model is that Jesus talked about in discipleship. Now, this is a comparison, a difference of what it looks like. And it depends on you guys sitting right here at this table. Let's look at just the first slide of this. So if I discipled Joshua Graziani, in 1 year I got 2 guys. And then the 4th year, what do I have? I have 4 guys. So we double it each year down to the 9th year, 512. Compared to the other guys, he's got 3,000. Doesn't work, does it? 18th year, 262,000. Not bad, but we haven't touched the 7.6 million people. But then in the 27th year, if each man that I disciple gets another man, disciples another man, at the end of 27 years, we've got 134 million people. We've easily passed Dallas. But the problem is, in the world, there's 7.6 billion people, of which 5.3 billion people are lost and dying and going to hell. Now, that's an eternal consequence, gentlemen. This is not just, it's okay, you can have the life the way you want it, I did it my way. This has eternal consequences. So if we do this in 33 years, within your lifetime, perhaps not mine, in 33 years, we can reach 8.5 billion people with no more money than you give to your church or what every missionary you give today. But what it will require of you, that's different than anything else, is at least an hour a week. Would you give your life away to another man, or if you're a woman, to a woman, to make sure they're tracking with Jesus? Can you spare 1 hour out of 160 hours a week? Can you do it, guys? Yes or no? This is not rhetorical. Can you do it? Are you willing to do it? You can make the difference in Dallas. And it's a volunteer job. But the pay has eternal dividends. You get it, right? All right, what's the next one? March 7th, you're going to see on your table, we have a 710 connection, which is also international Zoom meeting. On your table, you have these 2 cards, guys. See them? These are prayer cards I developed about 30 years ago. And we go through these prayer cards in groups of 5 people, 3 to 5 guys. Now, you have the card in your hand, and if you've given us your email, you'll get an invitation to the 710 connection. It's at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time on March 7th. We do it once a month. Something you could do, right? Just make sure you have your clothes on and have some fun. Now, if you're doing this in India, that's 7 p.m. at night. And these guys from India make it. You probably see some of their pictures up there. So it's a fun time. So that's a 710 connection, okay? See, myself or Phil. Now, I want to introduce you to Phil Carlson. He's my partner in crime of the Batman and Robin team. He's a full-time area director with me, and he's been busy with his second son. So they've been busy. So welcome, Phil Carlson, to tell you about a couple things.
I'm going to talk with you this morning about our Young Professional and Trusted Advisor Forums groups. So which one is on the slide next here? Young Professionals, great. Well, what I'm about to say applies to both of them, and that is that when you consider the most valuable forms of capital that you have access to. Now, of course, everyone immediately goes to financial capital or equipment. Like if you're looking for construction equipment, you can talk to my friend Jared Clark back here. He can help you with that. Or if you're looking for flooring, you can talk to my friend Philip Jones. He can talk with you about that. But besides sort of physical forms of capital, you have time. Time is one of the most valuable things you have. And arguably, it's the most valuable thing. Another thing that is extremely valuable is your relationships. And what Young Professionals exist for, as well as our Trusted Advisor Forum groups, is to help men who are in business and professional world build strong relationships with other men who are aimed at the same ultimate direction. You may be experts in different fields, you may be working in different industries, but when you can lock arms one with another, you know you've got guys who can see your blind spots. You've got guys who can help you in your own journey and help you to be successful with that. Number 1, in following Christ. And number 2, in actually helping you to grow professionally and personally in your life as well. So with the Young Professional groups, these are typically aimed at men who are under the age of 40. They're getting started in their careers, and they're able to meet once a month and actually hear from a guy who's typically in his 50s or older, who's got a background of leadership in the business world, but also in Christ. Now, these groups are membership fee based. These membership fees help pay for the operations of the group, but also CBMC as a whole. $125 a month for Young Professionals. We're going to be relaunching Young Professionals in just another month or two. Please talk with me or Stan about that if you're interested in that. That's a once-a-month meeting. They meet for 3 hours, and we'll get more details to you about that if you're interested. And so with that Young Professionals group, you actually hear from a business leader, and then you also get to work with each other through different challenges you're dealing with in one another's lives. You get to study the Word together and actually encourage each other, which y'all know this, that it is a very isolated feeling often in the business world and in the professional world to be a strong believer there when you know your colleagues, your coworkers, the people who work for you, the people you work for may not know the Lord, may not love Jesus. In fact, may actually be pressuring you against your Christian convictions. So when you get to meet once a month with a group of guys who are going to encourage you, man, that's like a breath of fresh air. So that's young professionals. And then Trusted Advisor Forums, that's aimed for those guys who are actually business leaders themselves. So you're not looking for a guy who's a business leader to come and introduce some concepts to you and teach you. Instead, it's you guys are coming together to actually support one another. We've got some of our Trusted Advisor Forum group members in this room right now who have been benefiting from it. And some of the topics we work through, it could be a guy trying to work through getting his business off the ground. Another guy who's looking at some kind of career transition the next month. Another guy could be talking about issues in his family and his marriage, that the guys are helping each other work through that. With each one of these meetings, again, we meet 3 to 4 hours a month, once a month, and we end up eating together and studying the Word together, but helping each other to grow as business leaders, but more importantly, as Pauls and Timothys, as men who are investing their lives in the lives of other men to follow Christ, but also who are looking to grow in following Christ through following the leadership of other men who've gone before them. So if you'd like more information about those groups and that membership fee for those, CBMC National just upped that to $200 a month. So that's something, happy to talk with you about. And right now we have a group that meets in Plano. It's actually over near the shops at Legacy. Over at Legacy Tower. They meet once a month on the first Thursday of the month. We're looking to start another group in the near future, and that's going to be meeting a little further west. We don't have a location for that yet. So if you want more information about that, please speak with me or Stan. Be happy to talk with you about it. God bless you all.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
So, on your table, pick up a card. You can see it's the multicolored card. Pick it up, please. It's sitting right over there. Take a look at it. Don't nod and say, just throw it away. All right. This is a way you can give to CBMC. We have needs in Dallas-Fort Worth to supply the gas, the fuel, to pay the rent, and what we do. Now, if you have a heart to give, give. If you don't, that's okay. But take this card because we have a need to run the budget through 2024. Very simply, check it out. You can talk to Phil and myself. You can know everything about our budget, what we do and what we don't do. So it's a very simple, we could use some help, send the money. All right? Thank you so much if you can do that. Now I have the pleasure of introducing this guy. And Dr. Nicholas Ellis, who has a doctorate of philosophy from the University of Oxford in England. And that's a lot. And he did a lot of study, and he teaches the Greek and the New Testament. He's the guy who he's sort of three components he told me about. One, he has a missional effort, and he was raised by parents that went down in Brazil, so he came out of that culture in Brazil, learning Portuguese, so he's very missional. And then he's very academic because he had his training there at Oxford, so he has that bent in him. Then, as he said to me, he was cursed with this blessing of entrepreneurship. He wants to start new things all the time, and he's going for it. So he started this process down in Brazil. It became very effective. He moved back up here with his family to Dallas, and now he's living in Midland. He'll talk to you about that. I've said enough about him. You'll learn more about Dr. Nicholas Ellis. Please welcome him to the stage. Good luck. He told me a story how he got to Oxford. So he showed up, and he's an American, and he doesn't know where Oxford is. He's looking around because he's looking for a campus like SMU or Texas Tech or something like that. So you see this little old lady in England and says, "Where's Oxford?" And she says in her English, "Oh, you must be from America," something like that. And he says, "Where?" She says, "All around you." And that's the concept. It's in halls around this town, or I guess Oxford or something like that. So it's interesting. Now, tell us a little bit what your parents did in Brazil for a short shot and your brothers or so and siblings, and then where you got this academic thought about educational system and processing.
Yeah, good. Well, it's great to be here with you all this morning. It's a real privilege to be here. So they say everything is biography in a sense. And so my mom is a Montana Mennonite farm girl, right? Large scale ranching from northern Montana, southern Alberta. And so there's deep in our blood is this kind of sense of localism, right? We know where my great-great-grandparents are buried. So that sense of permanence, that sense of human formation. And so mom came out of Montana. If you are a small town Mennonite rancher, you either ranch or you go on the mission field. And so she knew from a very early age she wanted to go on the mission field. Met my dad, who's a Nebraska farm boy, came down here to Dallas, went to Dallas Seminary, was a pastor at Wiley, Texas for about 12 years. So kind of grew up in Wiley. And then when I was 12, we moved to Brazil. And so moved to the North Amazon. And at the time, there's no schools up there. And so everybody would send their kids off to boarding school. And my mom said, we're not going to do that. That's crazy. I'm not going to give my kids to somebody else. And so they shipped a shipping container full of the great classics, the books. And she started the first kind of classical library in North Brazil and said, your childhood is going to be reading the greats and fishing peacock bass. And that was all right. I was okay with that. And that's what I did in Brazil. I fished and I read the greats.
So so you were essentially homeschooled?
Yeah, we did kind of tutorial, hybrid kind of stuff, but it was parentally governed, I would call it. Parentally governed education where the family is saying we're the primary educators of our kids.
All right, so how did you what's the high school? Give me a quick shout. High school, we think high school in Texas, USA. You didn't have high school per se. So you went there, then you got a GED or whatever you want to call it, or a self-certificate your mom stamped, and you went to a university. So that was the first university you went to, the University of Oxford? So how did you get in with?
Yeah, so we moved back to, they sent me back for my last year, second year of high school, moved to Rockwall to graduate. I did an economics class and I played football. That was my re-entry back into North American culture. And at that point, we began to, and we had been building educational communities across Brazil. This was a big part of it. All through my childhood, we started to say, how can we build Christ-centered local education in a very Marxist educational community that's like Brazil? It's a very strongly Marxist environment, heavily influenced by the Frankfurt School in Europe that very heavily influences the educational system in Brazil. So we began to build out, and mom became quite famous for having educated her kids, and then we went off and did our university stuff and became fairly successful. And so I came back to the States, did my studies in classics and literature, met my wife in college. She decided to go off to Africa.
College. In college, you are which college at this time?
So I went to Union University, Jackson, Tennessee, little Baptist school in Tennessee. Laura Lee had the option to marry me, and instead she ran off to Africa for 2.5 years. So, tough choice.
She abandoned ship.
She did. Yeah. And so then I began to study and moved to Germany, did my German studies there, Jerusalem for Hebrew and Dead Sea Scrolls, became the Canada Research Chair for Dead Sea Scrolls in Canada. And then when Laura came back, we were invited to move to the University of Oxford, where I did my master's and my doctorate. And that's
so you're invited. Now, how did you get invited?
Well, I became known as somebody who was working in Dead Sea Scrolls and Hebrew and Greek and Jewish literature and all this other kind of stuff. And so a professor at the university called me up and said, hey, I think we have a spot for you. Why don't you come and study with me? And that's how we ended up in Oxford.
And how long did that take in Oxford?
That was about a 5-year process, for my master's and my doctorate.
All right, now, what is a doctorate of philosophy? How would you explain that to a Texas boy?
Yeah, well, we read the texts. We read the greats. And the way you described me showing up at Oxford, this was a pivotal moment in my life, actually, because we arrived with a 10-week-old baby, my oldest. We've got 5 kids. Liam is now 14. My youngest is 5. So we showed up. He's 10 weeks old. We're in this tiny 400 square foot little flat, boxes everywhere, and she says to me, honey, maybe you need to go find campus and leave me alone for a little bit. And so I wisely exited stage left, let her figure out her house. And I decided to walk down and find campus. Walking around, trying to find the University of Oxford. And I spend 2 hours walking around town, and I can't find the University of Oxford. And so I asked this little old lady, could you tell me where the University of Oxford is? And the first thing she says is, are you American? I said, yes. She's like, what are you studying? It's like, well, I'm doing, graduate, theology, Bible, philosophy. She's like, are you an evangelical? I was like, yes, I am actually. She's like, I would bet you're at Wycliffe Hall, 2 blocks down to the left. I'm like, oh, what's Wycliffe Hall? I had no idea what I was signing up for, right? So the way that the University of Oxford works is there's a university that provides the degrees and basically provides the library. And all of your tutorials are in these 54 different colleges and halls all around town. And they're basically just a gathering of tutors. Now, when I say tutor to you, what do you hear? You hear 6th grade remedial math. That's what you hear when you think tutor. The Oxford tutorial model is actually all these PhDs, all these subject matter experts that gather together and invest in these students as they prepare to take their exams at the university. So this is the whole Oxford-Cambridge model that's been around.
So this is what I got from him. So he shows up there, goes to the hall, which is, Christian halls that he runs, all right, so the halls. And then it's like my concept, which is probably dead wrong, he sits down with this professor, PhD, whatever, and says, what do you think about this subject or, New Testament, whatever, or Greek? Write a 5,000-word essay on it, come back next week, we'll talk about it. So they do that for the whole semester, and then he presents the paper at the end of the semester to the accreditation or people to see if it's passed or failed, right? And how many people in your classroom?
So we typically had, my graduate cohort was, 5 to 6 graduate students meeting, do you remember, you guys know who C.S. Lewis is? So up at his place at the Kilns, we'd sit down and engage, discuss, write, peer review. That was our educational model. Asking questions, going and researching, writing, ripping each other apart, go back and do it again, so that
Now, you notice how this is different than our mass education at University of Texas or in high school, 1 teacher for 50 students, 1 per 4, 1 per 5. Think of the one-on-one stuff that goes on that takes place in there. You learn a man's heart. So you come out of there, well, how come you didn't go teach philosophy at Oxford or go to the School of Theology at Baylor or something like that?
My wife would ask the exact same question.
Okay.
She thought she was me either marrying a missionary or a professor, and instead she runs into the wood chipper of an entrepreneur. And what we saw was that, and I remember very distinctly sitting at university parks, just feeling the weight of, I've been trained to do this, but God is calling me to do something else. And I'm looking at the higher education space, the massive debt. Students come out with an average $100,000 to $120,000 of debt for your typical university. The ideological warfare that's taking place for the souls of our people. The way that many of our universities are tooled to siphon off our talent and our treasure from our local communities and no way to send it back. And our families are small town families from Yankton, South Dakota, Montana, Nebraska. And you go to these towns and the human resources are just stripped away from these communities because they have lost the ability to self-govern the formation of their people. And I saw that, and my missional heart was reawakened. But now with the tool sets to use and leverage on education to really create local human formation, local community flourishing.
Self-governed. Give me some more meat and potatoes around
Good.
that
So really the question that we're really trying to answer is who governs the formation of your souls? And what I mean soul is what C.S. Lewis in The Weight of Glory said, you are an eternal soul that is being formed for now and for eternity. education, in its best form, is the formation of that person, the formation of that soul. The question that we're trying to wrestle with, and you could even put this on the first slide, who governs the formation of our people? Is it university professors? Is it the government? Is it accreditors? Who governs the formation of our souls? And I saw that question being answered by a system, what I would call the educational industrial complex, that was colonizing and stripping away the resources of human formation instead of investing them back into local communities.
Forming a bunch of Marxists.
In the process, enslaving us with debt and forming a bunch of Marxists in the process. And I said, I'm on the tenure track process in Oxford. I'm looking over the edge, reached the kind of pinnacle of my educational career and said, there's nothing here. And felt the Lord call me at that moment to say, let's go build something else. And so that's when he kind of flipped that entrepreneurial switch inside of me. And so what we did is we basically took that model, this tutorial model, and over the last several years, you could go off to the next slide, I think. I can't quite see what's behind me, so what we're building is we're building this educational ecosystem that prioritizes the local community, first and foremost. We want to see flourishing local communities, flourishing families, flourishing businesses, flourishing schools, flourishing churches. That's where all the good stuff happens. If all of this educational work is not leading to the outcome of flourishing communities, then we failed. And so what we did is, you could advance the slide, we used this Oxford kind of model, this kind of Socratic discussion, and we said, let's go build centers of Christian formation. Instead of planting churches, we're going to go plant mentor-led, tutor-driven communities of education. And instead of me going and building a bunch of different universities, which is an incredibly high capital, intensive process, I'm going to leverage on the existing universities that are out there trying to build distribution. Because the old adage, as I say, is content's king, right? As they say. Well, content may be king, but distribution's queen, and she wears the pants, baby. And if you don't have distribution, you got nothing. And so I said to these universities, I'll go build distribution through this high mentorship, high outcome model. I need you to be the manufacturers. What I can't let you do is I can't let you govern the space because you've proven to be poor stewards of human formation. We have given you our best. You have stripped away their souls. We're no longer going to give you governance, but you still have a place. You can be my manufacturers. You can be my tooling. I'm just going to take away the reins of governance.
Give us 1 minute on these men that are in the small community groups, the experts. And my concept, now correct me if I'm wrong, just conception, how many guys in here are retired or want to be retired? I mean, just think about it. Okay, got it. He's got a way to repurpose you. You have 30 to 40,000 hours in your expertise in your industry, and impart that to these small community groups. Is this the concept you're
That's
talking
right.
about?
So you can see that we use our university partners and our content creators and our publishers as our supply chain. Think about that as our supply chain. And we go out and we license and broker. We have access to over 450 degree programs, aviation, computer science, business, theology, you name it, because there's actually quite a bit of supply out there. So we acquire that. We can negotiate a debt-free, pay-as-you-go price point. We develop a revenue share model so it creates sustainability both for us and for our local sites. But the magic in this is that local Christian hall. And when I say tutor here, it's the students have access to all of our university degree programs. They have access to all of the online content. Whatever we need, content is not the problem today. We have never had a more data-rich society. We've never been a less wise society. So somehow we have to reconnect data and wisdom. And wisdom is in our pews and in our businesses dying because we have abandoned our elders. And we've said, actually, we think that 32-year-old recent PhD blue-haired lesbian in the local community college is more apt to disciple my 18-year-old in a business degree than that godly 75-year-old retired businessman who's looking for something to do. And we've said, we're going to take back that governance space. And so the way this works is we go and we find, we're a human capital. I like how you use that, Phil. That's a good term. We're a human capital-driven organization because when I fly into Mason, Texas, like this last week, in this little Cessna 182 that I fly around, what am I looking for? I'm looking for those godly disciplers who can stick their hand up and say, I would love to mentor the next tradesman in my community. I'd love to mentor the next banker in my community. And the reason that I'm here is because you would think that our churches would hold the birthright of human formation. Most of our churches have sold that birthright for a bowl of cultural chili. Most of them have given away that birthright and said, we're going to outsource that. That's not our space. The business community is at the cutting edge of the human resource crisis in this country. You know what it means to have a high virtue, high character person come into your company. You know that how critical it is because your companies are failing when people come in and either can't do their job, they have poor competence, but even worse, they have poor character. So what we're doing here is we're creating an ecosystem where we have all of the supply chain, hundreds of degree programs. Accreditation is not the problem. We've licensed and brokered all this, but it won't work unless our local communities take back self-governance and say, I'll start discipling young men and young women. Now, we don't use the word discipleship because a lot of people say, oh, this is a discipleship church program. That's because our churches have utterly abandoned what soul formation should actually look like, right? And so we're saying to our local communities, are you willing? Here's an English composition class. Here's a business class. Here's a psychology class. Here's a philosophy class. Here are the different classes that these students need to take.
I'm going to volunteer my wife, who's good at English composition. Excellent. I mean, she is a good teacher, and she knows her stuff. So there's one.
And that is all it takes. We can get as complex as we want. We can build all these incredibly complex programs, but the starting point is to say, I will go take that community college student. Do we have anybody here in Collin College? I got a kid here in Collin College. Would I rather have him sitting with an unknown, faithless person, or would I rather grab somebody that can mentor and tutor that person, leveraging on that class, but actually now we have a human formational environment. And can I match the person up? And if I can tell you what, if I can get English Comp, World Civ, Psychology, Philosophy, and American History, if I can rescue kids from those 5 classes, I win. I don't even need the whole degree. We're just going to give governance of that space back. So we started to design these, and you can advance the slide. And suddenly what we thought was going to be primarily kind of our Christian community college and trade school program, which is massively important. Do you know how many students are in community college in Dallas-Fort Worth? Between Collin, Tarrant, and Dallas College, there are 350,000 students in an 80-mile radius in Dallas-Fort Worth. And those 3, do we have any Christian community colleges in that space? 0. Do you know how many Christian tradesmen or Christian trade schools are in the state of Texas? 0. Do you know why? 1950, GI Bill, all the money said to our Christian schools, hey, if you pivot out of the trade space and into the BA space, we'll give you money. And they followed the money. And we flushed our presence, our faithful presence in training the trades. Do you know what that's called? It's called a sin. That's what that's called. We have abdicated our right, our birthright, to train the people that are in every one of our homes every single day and we followed the money. And this hit me in the face when I was starting one of these in Uganda, and our AC went out here in Arlington. It was 100 and infinity degrees outside, like it is in July. And my wife calls me up and says, we have no AC, flew back from Uganda. This guy came in to fix our HVAC system. And you know that feeling with tradesmen where you're like, this guy's gonna come in. Do I need to send my wife and kids to the back bedroom? It's gonna be a good situation. This guy walks in and just spreads Jesus all the way through my house. Just spreads Christ. Ministers to my wife, ministers to my kids. I said, brother, where would you get the eloquence and articulated vision of the Christian discipleship that you have in the trade? He said, brother, there hasn't been a Christian trade school in the state of Texas in 50 years. And so we said, we've got to fix that. Well, guess who are the people that are desperate for high quality, high character people? Christian tradesmen that are graying out, saying, I have no one in this space. And now, guess what? That's a profitable space. You know, you can come out with no debt, with a trade, and have an incredible impact in your community. And somehow we have abdicated that space. So we started working in this Christian community college and trade school environment. And then people began to come to us and say, hey, that's great. My kid wants to study ballet or theater, performance arts. You know what the darkest programs are in our universities? Are drama, theater, music, film. And so we said, well, wait a minute, we've got Bachelor's of Fine Arts, Master's of Fine Arts. These are programs are here. And I've got really high quality, high character people who love the arts. And we've basically shoved them aside and said, sorry, you have no role here. Well, that means that we can, suddenly my entrepreneurial bell goes off, right? It says, why wouldn't we have a fully accredited Christian Conservatory of the Arts in every community? Because suddenly this becomes a design space, a human capital-driven design space. The accreditation is not the problem. The supply chain is not the problem. It's a question of the spiritual and moral courage to govern. That's the thing. And in North America, what I've been finding is with our Christian schools and our home schools, we kind of have developed our muscles in that space. But we're totally atrophied when it's like, we were able to do this when they're 17, and suddenly they're 18 and we've lost any ability to form humans all of a sudden. Why is that? Because we've convinced that we don't know how to use that muscle. And so we're trying to help people develop this human formational muscle. You can go to the next slide. And so to do this, you know, we've got our kind of Christian Hall design space. We're kind of an educational design house. Go to the next slide. Our supply chain are all of these different universities and curriculums and publishing houses that have said, go build distribution. And so we have hundreds of degree programs, thousands of classes that we can leverage on, but we won't do it unless somebody in your community says, I'll do it. I'll start meeting with kids. I'll start bringing kids into my business. I'll show them, instead of sitting online trying to do a spreadsheet class, go figure out our P&L. Here's a spreadsheet. We'll help you figure this out. We'll teach you Excel, but come into our soul formational environment. And as you're learning how to run an Excel spreadsheet, we're also forming souls. You know, education is soul formation. If I can leave you with one thing, it's that education is soul formation. And that is the space, that is the sphere of the church. Go ahead, next slide. And so we begin to build this out. And now we've got over, in the last 5 years, we've built over 450 campuses between Brazil, North America, Canada, East Africa. And then we started to look really hard at North Texas. And I can tell you that I think that North Texas is the flywheel that we could build to take this model and nationalize it and globalize it. There are more Christian businessmen who love the Lord in this community, more saturated than probably any other community in the world. And most of you have basically been shoved to the side as the human formational leaders of your communities. And we're saying to you, there's a space, there's a role for you to take back governance in this space. We can provide the degree programs. We can help with the design. What we need to do is we need you to put your hand up and say, I would be willing to start to disciple young men and young women. That's a big ask for many of you because you've never been asked to do this work before. Maybe you've been asked in a Sunday school. Maybe you've been asked in a Bible study. But how can you start to rethink what God has given you for your stewardship, your space, your sphere as a human formational sphere? And I can leverage on education. No debt, high formation, fully accredited, using known educations and known brands. That's not the problem. The problem is, where are we going to send these kids? Do you think that 10% of the kids in community college in North Texas, do you think 10% of those kids are godly, faithful young men and women who are just trying to stay out of debt? I'm not a math guy. What's 10% of 350,000?
35,000.
That's just 10%. 35,000 kids in these 3 counties that we could start to peel back and take back governance in the human formational space. And what it takes is it takes the willingness and the courage to say, I'll do it. I'll accept these kids. And guess what? And you benefit from now having access to our best and our brightest instead of them being siphoned off and sent out. Now we lose them. So that's the vision of Christian Halls International. Now, that can take any number of, that can look like any number of different designs. We show up in South Texas at the first national South Texas homeschooling co-op in McAllen.
Really?
Thinking, McAllen, Texas. And we think, maybe 20 people will show up. 1,000 homeschool moms show up. Hispanic, Catholic, Pentecostal. There's your demographic. And they have said they are stealing the souls of our kids. We send them to UT, we send them to A&M, we send them to Tech. We don't want them when they come back. We are no longer going to give the souls of our kids to the system. They love the Lord. Do you think that there's a single homeschool publishing house in Spanish? Nothing. Is there a single Christian trade school? Nothing. So they show up and they say, will you design for us? And I have to say to them, I can't do this for you, but you can. And I'll train you. We need people who have a heart for that community. DPhil. Do you think I can show up in DPhil? And do you think I can build a Christian community college in DPhil? I can't do it. It's not my space. Somebody has to take governance in that space. Who's that person? And if you have somebody coming to your mind, either logistical, kind of a leader, or even as simple as a high character, high qualified algebra teacher that is willing to start to take our Algebra 1 students in DPhil in South Dallas, we need to know. And that extrapolates everything from, conservative Mennonite farm communities in Alberta to Indian reservations in western Montana. That's the canvas that we play in. And God has given you a sphere. He's given you a very unique canvas, which is North Texas, with Christian business leaders, churches, schools. This could become the single most powerful flywheel for human formation in the country if you're willing to take back self-governance in this space. And it just takes the courage to lead.
So it takes one man, one woman to change a culture, one man at a time. And if you can reach those 35,000 JUCO students, just think about it. And I see about 6 men in here that are, quote, retired that can easily be repurposed to give your time away, whatever. How many hours a week does that require?
Usually we will have tutorial groups of 5 to 8, and we'll ask them to meet with a tutor per class about an hour and a half. That tutor...
An hour and a half a week?
Hour and a half a week.
160 hours a week, right? An hour and a half out of that? I know you got the time. I know you have the time. I know you have the time. I know you have the time. I know who I'm talking to. I know we got the time. So what are you giving your life to? The eternity is in the balance on these kids. What's the next thing?
So this is where the business community came to me and said, great ideation, great design, great supply chain, where's your go-to-market? That's why I love the Christian business community, because they actually care about results. Who cares about think tanks? We don't care about think tanks. How do you go to market? And so we had a guy out in West Texas, Tim Dunn, runs oil and gas, Crown Quest Oil and Gas, who said to us, hey, we run over 5,000 wells. We need to figure out what you're doing is you're digging human formational wells. How do you build a capital structure, a financial and operational and an organizational strategy to go scale? And so we built Aspen, you can go to the next slide, whose job is to identify, train, and consult with these client sites. And so we've got Seth Lewis, who's here. He runs our North Texas operation. You can stick your hand up. Bill Anderson, who helps us out as well. He's with Trail Life and kind of working across that community. And so as we've been building out distribution, these are the 5 different client types that we've seen. Homeschool co-ops. They move fast, they break stuff. They're used to doing weird stuff. Can we invite them in to say, just do a dual credit 13th, 14th grade. Just keep doing what you're doing, but just do the next thing. And they do it. Now, the problem is they may not be here in 10 years because parents come and go and they flake. But they're kind of our quick start, rapid kind of deployment vehicle. Our private Christian schools, they want to be there a little longer. They're more bureaucratic, take a while to get into. But I'll tell you what, our Christian-owned businesses are the environments that we see as the absolute cutting edge of how we can start to penetrate this culture. Churches, as I've mentioned, in our independent halls, which are like our conservatories. Next slide, please. There are homeschool co-ops all over this country that we're starting to build with. Keep going. ACCS, Associated with Classical Christian Schools, they've invited us to come in and basically build classical colleges on top of their existing infrastructure. So instead of us going in and building new entities, here's our partners. Let's just do the next thing. Keep going. Thousands of Trail Life, Christian Boy Scouts all over. We have an MOU with Trail Life to build Trail Life University.
All right, just a minute, slow down. They don't know what Trail Life is. So show the old school in what you've done.
Yeah, so like Christian Boy Scouts, as the Boy Scouts unfortunately went left and off the rails, a bunch of Boy Scout leaders came in and said, I think we can build this from within a Christ-centered framework. Well,
so Trail Life has how many troops across America?
How many troops are we? So we've got 1,100 existing troops, dads involved, deeply committed to human formation, chartered out of churches, staying out of debt. They're saying to us, well, I'm not going to go get debt for college. I'd rather go to the Marine Corps. And we'd say, well, hold on. Maybe, just maybe, we can start to build educational environments around this human capital that's already been gathered together.
And we got 55,000 people involved in Trail Life. They've taken over the concept of the Boy Scouts of America, which is woke.
So these are the kinds of gathering points and groupings that we can come in and build on top of. So we're not starting from scratch, right? Because again, distribution. How are we going to go build? If we do not have a Christian community college, zero debt, name brand, parked out beside every one of these secular community college, it's because we're lazy. It's because we're lazy. We're not competing. Nobody goes to Tarrant County Community College because they want Tarrant County Community College on their transcript. They're there because it's a good, solid, low-cost option. We're just so focused on the prestige play that we're leaving behind our Honda Civics and our Corollas and our Tercels. Well, let's just go learn from Toyota, take the long tail, and eventually we'll build our Lexus and eat the head. If we're willing to actually go penetrate the low-cost space. So this is what we're doing with our community college space. We can play in that water and offer a faithful, fully accredited, low-cost alternative. So this is the kind of distribution that we're looking at. Keep going. And so that's what we're tooled for. A self-governing, no debt, non-governmental alternative for true national transformation, leveraging on education. And it's true, we have to provide very high-quality education. But that's not the actual outcome. The outcome is flourishing local communities that have repurposed the wisdom that exists within our communities for multi-generational flourishing. That's what we're about in Christian Halls International.
They've already created 450 campuses, right?
Yeah, hit that last slide. Yeah, so really the question is, where do you fit? That's what I'm going to ask you. Where is your role? CHI, we're in the kind of design, funding, ideation space. Guess who the first groups are when I go to a new town and I say we have a small group-oriented mentorship model with deep integration into the business community? It's actually my special needs moms. Because they come in and they say, wait a minute. We already have a really terrible support system for special needs, special education in high school. Guess what happens at 12th grade? It evaporates. You're telling me that my kid can get a good quality education, mentorship, and job placement and not push carts around at Walmart? I'm in. Let's go. Well, that is a very specialist space, and so we had Tim Tebow's guys come out to Midland a couple weeks ago, because what's his passion? Special needs. And they said, we want this space. We want to help design, fund, blueprint. We'll build one in Jacksonville, Florida. We'll build it within an African-American community that we're already partnered with. We'll design it, and then you can deploy it at scale. Aviation. I'm a pilot. What's the old joke? How do you know if there's a pilot in the room? Because he'll tell you. You know, they just love aviation. And a lot of these retired guys have their toy sitting in the hangar that they have to justify to their wife, right? Well, here's our BS in aviation, Indiana Wesleyan or Southeastern. We can do that entire degree. What do I need? Godly, high mentorship pilot that would love to take 5, 6 kids and invest in their lives. So what I'm asking people is, where has God placed you? Maybe it's in the ideation space, maybe it's in the design space, maybe it's in the funding space. How do we turn CBMC North Texas into an ecosystem, looking at the business community around North Texas and saying, where are the godly mentors in this space? I don't know them. But you do, and Stan does. And so that's where I work through networks. Maybe you're in the content space. Maybe you have a great idea for building an MBA that can actually practically train and form people within a particular business. I want to talk to you because we want to take that design space and start to scale it. Maybe you love that hunter-killer sale kind of ecosystem. You're like, I want to go out and find those mentors and tutors, and that's the space that I love. Those sales guys are awesome for us, because they live and breathe on, let's go find our assets. Great, let's repurpose that drive. Now not for church planting, but for planting centers of human formation. And finally, it all leads to that local Christian hall. Are you willing to actually take a young man or a young woman and invest a couple hours every week as they're working through their educational environment? And I'll tell you what, if you can just speak into 1 or 2 classes. I'm telling you, if you can, that business class that has been repurposed for woke Marxist ideology, and save the soul of that kid from that one class, you can literally save their life. Psychology, English comp, philosophy, U.S. history, business essentials. This is the design space that we have to play in. And maybe you're actually willing to say, I'm in. I'd love to start to disciple using the gifts that God's given me, because, not everybody needs to go plant a church. Not everybody needs to go on the mission field. We've used that as an alternative to actually doing the hard work, which is to build here and build flourishing communities. So that's the space.
Nick and I have talked about this, that we become affiliates between, I would say, Aspen or CHI and CBMC here in Dallas. And it's an affiliation of the heart. And we want to help get men and women involved with CHI. And he's thought about a process. I think you have an application process. And get that to me. If you have an interest in this, you fill out an application, we'll look at it, fill it out, send it up to him, you get vetted out, see if we're in. So I know there's a lot of characters in here. You guys are characters. What we need now is godly character. Okay, the difference. And I know there's competency in this room.
And I would also say, guys, you know, we recognize that we're trying to build something. It's funny, when I talk to Brits and I talk to people in the UK, they're like, oh, just like building another Oxford College. This makes total sense. We get it. Here in North America, like, there's nothing to put handles on this thing. This thing doesn't exist. And so those of you who are the kind of creatives, kind of thinking types, we need you to help us build metaphors. You know, one guy actually just wrote me 2 days ago and said, you're almost like pivoting from the old supercomputer to the personal computer. You know, you're an operating system that takes all of the software, repackages it, and puts it back in the home, in the community. But instead of a digital solution, ironically enough, it's a human solution. We need you guys to help us think about how to communicate what we're doing, because we have to put handles on these resources. You know, we have unbelievable assets in terms of supply chain, market, brand, all that kind of stuff. We have to think about how to actually leverage on this and go to communities and explain it. And in your mind, if the Lord puts a little idea in your head, it's kind of like this. In my industry, maybe it's an apprenticeship, maybe it's a trade program. We're just building our sustainable agriculture program. Why? Because all of our farms are getting bought up by, you know, Bill Gates. Well, frankly, I don't want Bill Gates to own all the properties. And I would like to see sustainable farming continue to take place in our communities. How do we train those families and train those communities? That's a different ecosystem. So in your space where God's gifted you and stewarded you, if you have ideas on how this could be packaged, described, and put handles on, I really want to talk to you. Because in North America, this is a completely new concept. But it's the old way of doing education. It's nothing more than going back to the synagogue, sitting on the forum, you know, with your mentor.
So guys, when you sit there and you think about this, and you have time, and we don't know when we're going to die and get out of here, right? So we're burning daylight with all the assets and competency you guys have and the character they have that comes from God. We can help rebuild this thing. A couple hours a week. It's just not going. You don't have to work 24 hours a day. You understand what I mean? But investing in the hearts of young men and women in different capacities with what you know and practice and it works. So we want to start right now. We're going to have a Q&A. And Chase has a microphone, or Dennis will bring some microphones to us. We have about 15 minutes. And after that, Dr. Ellis will be right down here. You can ask some questions or ask me or anything else. So I actually think my wife may have the first question. Just a minute. We got a microphone coming. That's the only woman in the room, my wife, Laura Bauer. Laura?
Put on the spot.
First. No, I, as an educator and as a person who tried to build a program in St. Louis, the first thing that the senator said to me was, you know, the powerful people in the educational space are going to go after you when they realize that you're stealing their stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious about two things. One, we know this guy from Russia, Sutsarov. What was his first name? Sasha Sutsarov, who couldn't get accreditation for his
Degree in theology, so he went to Scotland.
Yeah, because the educational powers that be had to bestow upon him accreditation. So how do you get around that when you have all these, I'm assuming they're volunteers, but they don't have their, quote, credibility, what do you call that?
Yep.
Accreditation.
Yeah. So you have to think about what we're doing at CHI as a guild. We're building a parallel structure. Our universities, we have all the accreditation we need. They're all online. And our students can tap into that entire existing educational ecosystem. We're just repurposing it and returning governance back to where it needs to be with the elders and leaders of our communities. So students are getting their degrees from our universities. We're not an accredited educational institution. Our universities are. We're just treating them like vendors, right? They don't like that. They don't like that terminology. But guess what? If they bring us bad product, they bring us godless Marxist education wrapped up in a pseudo-Christian brand, we fire them and we find another product. And that creates the right capitalistic structures for quality control in the market. And so that's why we're fiercely multi-vendor, why we never sign exclusive agreements, even though our universities constantly say, oh, we'd love to be your exclusive provider. No. We're going to hold your toes to the fire, and you're going to bring us quality product, we're going to fire you. Full stop. It changes the entire power structure of the educational ecosystem. Our job is to be the governors and stewards of the human formational space. We don't need degrees for that. We need competency. We need character. So that's why we don't have to tool up as a manufacturer. We can work in the customer care distribution space. I'm using business metaphors here. We need better metaphors, actually. But that's how we're able to do this work at scale without building a college or an accredited institution every single place that we go. Does that help clarify kind of the structures?
A little bit. Yeah. Rob has a question, don't you, Rob Phillips?
And real quick, question from the live stream. We're getting quite a few people that are interested. What is the best way for them to say, yes, I want to get involved?
Good. Well, christianhalls.org, Christian, H-A-L-L-S, christianhalls.org. You're going to have two options, two calls to action: join a hall or start a hall. Very simple. Come in and be part of one of our existing communities or start one. So that's a great way to get involved. Kind of on the operational side, there's this think tank development side. If you're really interested in your space and you say, I had a guy come to me, runs a microchip company, and said, we need to build sustainable, reshored microchip technology because we're so dependent offshore. He said, here's my foundry, here's our design, let's go build a better way of doing microchip stuff. Am I a microchip specialist? No. Do we need the people that can move into that space? Absolutely. So if that's your space and you'd like to talk with us about how we could impact your industry and your sphere of influence, we want to talk to you.
Hey, Dr. Ellis, Rob Phillips here. Thank you for your time with us today. I have a question about your growth, in business terms, growth plan, and
Yep.
I tend to look overseas for my businesses and opportunities on an international basis.
Yes. Yeah, so we started as an international program. We thought this was going to be a missional operation to help our underserved communities in Brazil and South America and Africa. Shockingly, we were redeployed to the States as a missional effort because it turns out y'all are in a worse spot than most of our international communities when it comes to education. But there is significant opportunity here on the missional side as well. The fact that we have all the supply chain, we can do cost control through large-scale purchasing. We have kind of rethought the way that we do supply chain management in the educational space. How do we distribute this into communities, both globally and also, North America is an incredibly diverse ecosystem. I talked about South Florida or South Texas. Every single community that you look at, even here in Texas, is a different design space, for distribution. And so we need people that are savvy, that can look at this space and say, I think this is what we would build here. We have families, very, very wealthy families, who would never touch a community college brand with a 10-foot pole. What, you don't think we could pay for our education? My kids don't go to community college. Well, frankly, we need to design a different brand for that. If that's our Volvo or our Kia, what's our Porsche? Oh, well, you know what? We've got study abroad to Oxford. We've got study abroad to Jerusalem. We've got our business deployments. We've got our politics, philosophy, and economics program in DC. That's a design space. How do we design to fit the affinity group and the culture that we want to go distribute into? So it's a packaging and strategy piece, even if the tooling, the manufacturer, is in the same factory. How do we go distribute to meet market? And that's where we need people who love their communities, because they're going to know how we design to meet the needs of their local communities. That's how we think in terms of the educational design side. Is that remotely answering your question? Okay.
Dr. Ellis, my name is Joshua. I have a friend that's a pilot with a plane that I'll refer you to. But I come from a background, I went to college for art, multimedia, graphic design.
Good.
I got recruited into insurance and financial services. So I never worked the industry.
Yep.
And so I have a two-part question. One is, are your teachers or mentors or tutors, are any of them full-time, or is it strictly volunteer? Do you limit them? And two, would you, for me as an example, would you use me in the art space and the insurance space, even though that I didn't work in the graphic space? I'm super good at graphics. I love the industry. I got my degree there. Could you elaborate?
Absolutely, that's great. Well, first of all, from the sustainability side, I knew immediately that this had to be a sustainable program. We were not going to be able to build this on the back of volunteers. And so one of the first things that we did is not only can we set price point, we also have wholesale retail relationship with our schools. So 25% of the gross of the tuition goes back to that local community to compensate those tutors and mentors in that space. So that could be very, very part-time, and a lot of our part-time people actually just, hey, a couple hours a week, let's just give it back to the local site, whatever. But absolutely, we want our tutors to start to merge over from, just teaching in the secular space to starting to actually kind of move full-time into the space. So there's revenue involved, and we just need to build a little P&L for every one of our communities. Because the problem is these educators, they haven't really thought about it in business terms. So we have to come in and mentor them into what's your market? What products are you selling? Are you going to do just dual credit, very low margin, high scale stuff? Do you go MBAs, high margin, low scale? Kind of thinking in this kind of business design space, what kind of educational ecosystem you want? Maybe it's not a degree. Maybe it's just certificates or licensure in real estate. Well, that would be amazing. Let's put together a group of 5 or 6 young men, mentor them in the real estate space, give them the tools that they need, and then release them to go start their own little agency. What an unbelievable opportunity to impact our communities. And in the process, why don't you franchise it, take an ownership stake, and start to build, so suddenly all of your entrepreneurial wheels start spinning around, how can I build a human formational engine? Because that's where all the good stuff happens. Right? So that's how we think about both the revenue side, the sustainability side, and how you can build. Now, for me, the mentors, coaches, tutors, whatever you want to call that, that's competency and it's passion. I don't care if you're accredited. We've already got the professors. If you want to teach as a professor, talk to me. We'd love to hire you as one of our professors of record. That's a different industry. That's the professional class over here. What I need people who are willing to say, I'll mentor these kids. And so whether that's graphic design, whether it's real estate, whatever, will you accept some apprentices? Will you go the old paths of apprenticeship and discipleship in human formation instead of just constantly outsourcing them to the institutions? So yeah, both, I would say. Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand. You partner with a local college, right? If a kid is in Christian Hall's classes, where do they get the credit for the college?
Good, great. Let me try to boil it down to its bare bones. We partner not with the local college. We partner with our universities who have online degrees. So we use them as our supply chain. We will enroll our students into an online degree program, and then we can deploy that anywhere. So I'm building these local mentorship communities. They're getting their credit from my university. So it would be no different than if they went to, say, Liberty University, enrolled as a student, and got their degree online. We're just taking that digital ecosystem and we're trying to put it back into a human formation.
Okay, so with Dean, as you said, if he volunteers for this stuff, do it. So the guy's taking the course, but what does he do, and when does he meet with these students, and what does he bring to the table?
So what we have is we have from these universities, we know everything that these students are going to study throughout the semester. We've got their syllabus, we've got all their assignments. We know exactly what they're, now I don't know about you guys, what percentage of data that you remember from your college class. I maybe remember 10%. Right? Your job as the tutor is not to regurgitate all the data. You've got about 16 weeks with these kids per class. That's a typical semester length. Maybe it's 8, maybe it's 16. Those are 16 hour-and-a-half opportunities for you to ask the right questions to these students. Maybe it's a business class. Who's your market? Who's your client? You know, those big questions as they're working through this class. Maybe it's a ministry class. They're studying all this data around Bible and theology and all this other stuff. Okay, let's ask the big questions because those are going to be the hooks. Those questions that you as the tutor have the opportunity to govern, that's what they're going to remember more than any other data that they see in a textbook or a video, right? So they're both enrolled at our university for their content and data and all that other kind of stuff. They're getting the degree from the university. They're meeting with you, and you know everything that they need to study, and you're asking the big questions and guiding them through that class. That's really the most boiled down version of what we're talking about. You're going to have 16 weeks, 16 sessions to ask the most important things to form and shape their souls. That's your role as the tutor. And they're getting their degree from the university that we partner with. Does that help?
Helps me. I get it. I finally get it. We have, 2 more questions. We have 2 minutes, so 1 answer per minute for the question.
Okay, so I was trying to understand the kind of the model. So I'm a high schooler and I'm homeschooled. I can kind of migrate into this kind of online with a local tutor. Or I'm a community college kid who's also then getting a mentorship. So does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's...
Okay, so that's your 1 minute. I got a follow-up. How do you keep it low cost if I'm partnering with a Liberty Online or a University of Phoenix or whatever? Do you bargain with them to keep their costs way down for the tuition?
Yes. So our supply chain goes from dual credit for the high school students all the way through PhD. Like we have degree programs all the way, you name it. We broker and negotiate for the rights to that supply chain, if you will. And part of that is negotiating a price point that's usually about a 2/3 cost reduction. And so we're just purchasing at scale. It's just leveraging on standard business stuff that the universities have never worked with.
Well, let me ask you this. Does he get paid for his time?
Yeah, so a part of the revenue share goes back to that local community. That's
to him, to the guy who's tutoring those guys in accounting for that hour and a half, he gets a check.
That's right. That's right.
And the students help pay for his time.
Well, the students pay the university, and we just have a revenue share.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just wholesale retail stuff. You know, it's not complicated.
1 more question. Dirk Hansen.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. Is this on? Yeah, this is on. Dr. Ellis, I love everything about the program. I see this, I guess maybe just a comment, that the business community is so important because the perception out there is for me to get that big job, big pay, all of that young people are looking for. I need to have that Ivy League degree or whatever, just that diploma. And it just seems like the business community embracing this and endorsing it. We all know in this room that integrity matters, character matters, but I think contending with that maybe false perception is one of the keys.
That's right. Well, and I'll tell you what, if the business community can say that and can govern that and can help guide, I see our business leaders as the guides for the next generation And if the business community can say, let us help you, let help us, and maybe you do need a degree for a particular pathway. Here are the options. Here's a good solution. You know, instead of the recruiting officer at the university dictating what you go do, let the business community say, here are the kinds of things that we need you to do. And maybe, guess what? Maybe you don't need $200,000 of debt to perform this function. Let us guide you and help you. And now we're returning governance back to the elders and leaders of our community, which just happen to be our multi-generational business leaders that want to be in our communities and want to see flourishing communities. I just want to put you back in the space that God has intended for you, you know, which is to guide and lead the next generation. And that will break the shackles of the industrial complex, the educational industrial complex that wants to dictate the pathways and is just a self-feeding system.
All right, so he has found a solution to defeat these high costs of education. Dr. Nicholas Ellis, all right? You can participate with them, whether you're in Brazil or Uganda or India or something like that. There's a lot of competency over there. You guys, here's an opportunity. We can change the face of America one young man at a time, doing it by the older guys. And then you younger guys that have kids going into college, here's a system so you don't have to pay $200,000 a year as I did at Baylor University for the kids, saving you money. So he's got time for question and answers, so give him a round of applause and thank you for being here.
Thanks. Good to be here. Thank you very much.
So our next Confluence is set for May 23rd. We're bringing back Terry Looper, the owner of Texan Company. And with him would be Mr. Mark Whitaker. It is May 23rd, so I got Batman and Ramen, a dynamic duo. You'll enjoy him. He's written the book, Terry Looper, called Sacred Pace. I encourage you to read it. There's many in here who have read that book. We've gone down to visit him in his office and gleaned some wisdom from this PhD of the oil and gas industry, Terry Looper. So put that in your calendar. And Dr. Ellis available for questions, and we'll see you next time. So God bless you people. Thank you.